Hello, thanks for joining me. My name is Stefan and I'm a primary school teacher from the UK. One of my passions as a school teacher was to teach Shakespeare, and I've co-written a book about this that's due out later this year. The book is from the excellent David Fulton publishers and it's called Teaching Shakespeare in Primary School, All the World's a Stage. It's available to pre-order now. On the 23rd of April, people celebrate the date of Shakespeare's birth and his death, and you might be doing some activities in school to mark the occasion. If you are and you're not sure where to start, this video might be helpful. I have some really strong memories of reading Shakespeare for the first time. And I'll be honest, my first encounter was not a good one. It was high school and we were reading Julius Caesar. And I imagine many of you will recognise the scenario I'm about to describe. The teacher assigned parts for the children to read. She handed out badly photocopied versions of the script, and we read the play in the original language, sat down at our desks. It took several lessons, and my speaking part, as a very minor character, didn't happen until the second or third day. Now, when a character made a long speech, the teacher would stop and she would explain to us what it meant, and she would point out to us which lines were important and which ones we needed to remember. Yes, it was awful. Now, if your experiences of meeting Shakespeare at school were the same as the ones I've just described, you probably were left with the same impression, that Shakespeare was boring and you didn't understand a word of it. This example, it contains all the classic mistakes of teaching Shakespeare. We read the texts in full from page 1, when actually much of the good stuff doesn't happen until much later in the story. We were sat down at our desks when Shakespeare's meant to be performed. And we had a teacher on hand explaining to us what every word meant. What we thought about it didn't really matter. Shakespeare was an entertainer. He wasn't a prophet, so there's no true meaning there to try and decode or decipher. And what matters is what the audience takes from it when they watch a performance and what the reader takes out of it when they're acting. Now, of course, there's not just one way to read a play, but I found that working with children, breaking it down into 3 clear stages really helps. That is, reading the lines, reading between the lines, and reading beyond the lines. By thinking about it in this way, it actually makes reading Shakespeare much more manageable and makes it a much more child-friendly, learner-centred experience. And as a non-Shakespeare expert, it helps me too. So let's have a look at those 3 stages in a bit more detail. The first one is reading the lines. Much is made of Shakespeare's language being too complicated for adults, let alone children. And yes, it can sound a little bit different to the language we speak today, but it's important to remember that Shakespeare was not a novelist. He was a poet who wrote plays. And that's why his writing is full of strange word choices and flowery images. And if it's any comfort to you, Shakespeare's audiences would have probably been quite confused or challenged by the language too. But the grammar and the syntax that Shakespeare uses, they're quite close to the ones we use in modern day English. And that's why Shakespeare's English is called early modern rather than old English, such as the form that Chaucer would have used. So when you're reading a script with children or reading a version of Shakespeare, it's really important to choose the text carefully. An example, the animated Tales scripts, they're written with children in mind, but they retain the richness of the language whilst making it accessible. And when you do read the script with children or read Shakespeare's words with children, treat it like a poem. Allow it to be read aloud. Don't keep stopping to explain what it all means. You need to get a feel for it first before you start trying to pull it apart. Playing around with Shakespearean insults and greetings can actually be a really good way of actually getting the children started before you look at a script. Now, my favourite part of reading Shakespeare is reading between the lines, that is, making sense of the imagery. Now remember, Shakespeare was a poet, so we should read the lines of the characters' dialogue as if they were lines of poetry. Now take this example from Brutus. It's a speech in Julius Caesar. Now, I've taken this version from an adaptation for children. It's slightly different than the original. Brutus says, "It must be by his death. He would be crowned, and how that might change his nature. Therefore think of him as a serpent's egg and kill him in the shell." Now that's a really powerful speech by Brutus, but what does it mean? So start by taking the temperature of the lines. We can guess who Brutus is talking about, it's his friend Caesar. But which words jump out at you? Maybe death, serpent, kill, egg, crush. So what do we make of that? This is clearly violent talk, so we maybe can see this as his violent intentions towards Caesar. But why serpent and not, say, a lion? I mean, Caesar was a brave warrior after all. What does it mean to call a person a snake? Do we know other stories with snakes in them? Now, Shakespeare is not on hand to tell us the right answer. It's a gap, a bit of thinking space. It's what we read into it that helps us understand the characters and their motivations. Now, when we've considered the words the characters say, it's time to start reading beyond the lines. What is this play about? What do we think Shakespeare is trying to say to us? Now, a fun way to do this is to try and summarise the play in just one word. So, is The Tempest about magic or revenge? Is The Winter's Tale about family, destiny, or something else? Again, Shakespeare doesn't tell us the right answer, and to be honest, it's probably good that he doesn't. That would take the fun out of guessing. So, Shakespeare was a poet, and the language he uses, it doesn't flow like a novel, but that's what makes reading his plays a rich and interesting thing to do. And with children, deciding what a play is all about should be an active experience. Active bodies, active minds. But, spoiler alert here, Shakespeare is long dead. We don't know what he meant, and honestly, it doesn't matter. It is how we, the reader, make sense of it that does. If you like this video, please feel free to share it, and if you would like to comment, please keep it kind and constructive. You'll find more ideas like this for teaching Shakespeare in our new book, Teaching Shakespeare in Primary School, All the World's a Stage, which is due out later this year. And if you would like updates, you can follow me on Twitter. Thanks for listening.